Hello everyone and welcome to yet another Jujutsu Kaisen character discussion. Today I'm going to be talking about Ryomen Sukuna, the King of Curses, and I guess one of the main antagonists of Jujutsu Kaisen. That's the funny thing about Sukuna, is that until recently, he hasn't really had much of a direct influence on the plot. He's responsible for Yuji getting dragged into the Jujutsu world. He's responsible for his death at the end of the Cursed Womb arc. And after that, he hasn't really done much until very recently in Shibuya, which I will talk about later in this video. But before we start talking about the Ryomen Sukuna we know from Jujutsu Kaisen, we should probably talk about the real-world Ryomen Sukuna. By real-world, I mean the mythological Ryomen Sukuna. So, Sukuna in real life was a specter that appeared in the Hida province of Japan in ancient times. He was described as having two faces, one on the front of his head and one on the back of his head. He had two pairs of arms and two pairs of legs, and he was said to have multiple swords and a bow and arrow. So, not as hot as the Sukuna that we may be more familiar with, but you can certainly see where some of the features sort of come from. He has much more resemblance to what we assume is original appearance of Sukuna from ancient times. Of course, the one that we see most commonly is the Sukuna who has taken on the appearance of Yuji because he's possessing his body. There aren't very many real-life depictions of Sukuna. All I could find was the boss from Neo 2. Still need to play that. But this is sort of where we get into how curses and legends and myths, things like that, sort of work in Jujutsu, is that Gojo himself says that Ryomen Sukuna is known by most people that know of him as this imaginary god, this sort of made-up deity, demon, yokai, whatever you want to call it. And we've had references to various other things like this in the series with things like the smallpox deity, and Nanami talking about some sort of local shrine deity that he and Haibara went to go fight. It was how Haibara got killed during Hidden Inventory, which has led me to wonder whether or not these curses are created by people's belief in the entity, or if the curse comes into existence and then people worship it as a deity of some kind because of it. And in the context of Jujutsu, I'm much more confident in saying it's probably the latter, because we learn that Ryomen Sukuna was an actual person, seemingly some kind of sorcerer who was alive 1,000 years ago, and became so powerful that no one was able to defeat him, and he eventually became some kind of cursed spirit, somehow. We have some theories about how that happened. There is old art showing what is supposedly Sukuna's real body, his corpse, and this depiction of his body has led some to believe that he underwent some sort of Buddhist mummification process where, as far as I understand, they basically just sit around and meditate or whatever until they are mummified, which is like kind of metal, actually. And that is supposedly how Ryomen Sukuna became a cursed spirit, or a cursed object in the case that he is before the start of the story, because his 20 fingers from his forearms were chopped off, and his soul was preserved in each of them. So it's likely that Sukuna became a curse through this mummification method and turning himself into cursed objects. We don't really have any other examples of humans becoming curses other than Rika Orimoto. I think that was her last name. Yes. Rika, Yuta's childhood sweetheart, who he accidentally turned into a vengeful spirit upon her death in a car accident. So we've seen that humans can be turned into curses by sorcerers, but we don't really have any other examples of sorcerers or just humans in general turning themselves into curses. So Sukuna is somewhat unique in that sense. So, the mythological Sukuna also informs the powers that Sukuna had. If I had learned about this ahead of time, perhaps his reveal of that fire ability wouldn't have been so surprising. But nonetheless, the real-life Sukuna has two swords and a bow and arrow, which, if you recall, is essentially what Ryomen Sukuna in Jujutsu Kaisen has. He has his two slashing attacks, Dismantle and Cleave, which we have seen depicted as two different types of sort of cooking knives. And then, of course, his unnamed fire ability, which has always been portrayed from the, two times that we've seen him use it, as sort of being like a bow and arrow with the way he uses it. So, the interesting thing is that these are mostly the only abilities that we've seen him use that come from the actual myth, which leads me to believe he does not have more powers, but he could, because one thing that the real-life Ryomen Sukuna does not have is anything resembling Malevolent Shrine, which is, of course, Sukuna's domain expansion, which resembles a Buddhist shrine decorated with skulls. Now, his domain expansion is unique among all others, and that it is not a barrier. It does not have a barrier surrounding it that makes it almost impossible to escape, like all of the other domain expansions we've seen. But in return, the guaranteed hit attacks within the domain are way more powerful, and the domain itself is almost described as a divine technique. So we have more of this idea of Sukuna being almost this deific figure, who's on a level beyond just these normal curses created by negative human emotions. He's like a god of curses. So we see a lot of that with just how powerful his techniques are. So Sukuna is not like a lot of the shonen main characters with there's this demon thing trapped inside of them. Sukuna is not quite like most of those in that he's some sort of, misunderstood tragic figure. I'm sure he has some kind of tragedy behind him, of course. There is a theory that he was, some kind of chef working for one of the big families or something like that, and then a bunch of bad stuff happened, and that's what led him down the path of evil. But outside of that, the dude is just straight up fucking evil. As soon as he comes back to life, in Chapter 1, he's like, oh boy, I can't wait to massacre a bunch of women and children. Oh, subarashi! It's going to be such a great time. I can't wait to murder as many innocent people as possible. Not a great guy. Every time that he has been brought forward thus far, he wants to make Yuji as miserable as humanly possible. He tries to kill Yuji's friend Megumi. He intentionally takes Yuji hostage by ripping his own heart out, which leads to his initial death. He refused to help Yuji save Junpei from Mahito, and then laughed along with Mahito when Junpei died. And most recently, in the Shibuya incident, upon getting 15 fingers, as a total, having 75% of his power back, and being free for a couple minutes, he decided to vaporize several city blocks of Shibuya, likely killing hundreds if not thousands of innocent people. And after doing so, he was basically like, haha, take a look at this, brat, and then just fucked back off into Yuji's inner conscience. The guy is evil. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Sukuna is neutral evil, which I mean is, almost the worst evil. I don't know, you could argue chaotic evil is worse, but neutral evil is, more competent. Because we've learned recently that Sukuna actually does have some kind of plan in place when he met up with Ryomen after killing Jogo. He apparently does seem to have some kind of plan to get out of Yuji's body. How exactly he plans on doing that is not clear thus far. It may have something to do with Megumi, because he just seems to have way more interest in Megumi beyond just Megumi having a really strong technique with the 10 Shadows and Maharaga. It may have something to do with his ability to travel within shadows, store things within shadows. We'll have to see, because there's definitely much more to it than we've seen thus far And I think Sukuna is going to be having a lot more agency in the plot. Maybe not soon, but sometime in the future. We'll have to see. Now, Sukuna is the oldest cursed spirit we have seen thus far. And as mentioned, he is unique because he is a human that became a cursed spirit. Now, this is a fascinating contrast with the disaster spirits, who are fairly new cursed spirits. They're unregistered special grades, who think themselves to be the true humans because they are created from emotions without falsehoods like hatred and regret and fear, things like that. And as such, they will become the new humanity because they're true humans, and they want to replace the imposters that we know as humans. So you have this ancient curse who was once human within the main character who is fighting against these newborn curses who want to become human. It's a very interesting contrast. And we do see that at the end of the fight between Sukuna and Jogo, who, while not really the leader of the disaster spirits, he had always wanted Mahito to be the leader, and Mahito did always seem to have more of like a leader position. He was put on more of a pedestal. Jogo always seemed to be like the wise man behind it all. Like, he's the old guy who's sort of keeping everyone in line, stuff like that. And when Sukuna mops the fucking floor with Jogo, he tells Jogo that he should be proud because he's one of the strongest people that he's fought over the last 1,000 years. So, you know, just your regularly scheduled reminder that yes, Jogo is a jobber, but that doesn't mean he's weak. He's just really unlucky because his two major fights were against the two strongest characters in the entire series. But upon hearing this, Jogo cries. He shows human emotion, which is completely unprecedented for curses, and he has no idea what it is, because this is a new thing for curses. It's a new thing for him. He's never experienced anything like this before. And Sukuna says, how should I know? I don't know what that is either. So, furthering the difference between the old school curses and the new school curses is this difference in emotions, where Sukuna is completely without any real subtlety. He tells Jogo that you shouldn't have worried about like this plan about trying to replace humans or whatever. You should have destroyed everything you came across. You should have burned everything to the ground if you wanted to be a true curse like me. If you wanted to reach my heights, that's what you should have done. So he has totally abandoned his emotions and his humanity, whereas Jogo, who has wanted to become human, has fallen into these emotions. He's moved by Sukuna applauding him, who is basically like their god, essentially. He is the king of curses. So, I mean, if you're able to get compliments from him of all people, I mean, of course you'd be moved to tears by it. But that's more interesting. Like, we sort of get into more of the emotional layers of Sukuna. Like, we've just gotten into it. He's fucking evil. Like, I need to state that again. Sukuna does not have good intentions, as far as we can tell. And even if he does, the guy is completely sadistic and psychotic. He's not a good guy. But he does seem to have much more to him than just being bloodthirsty and full of himself. There is more to it than that. Sort of like a Blood Knight, respect for strength thing. We'll have to see. I assume if Sukuna gets to interact with Gojo more than just their little spat in Chapter 2 and the little snarky comments in Chapter 3, we will get a lot more into Sukuna's beliefs and his characteristics as a person, because Gojo will be the strongest person that Sukuna fights. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Gojo is basically the sorcerer equivalent of Sukuna. He is the pinnacle of Jujutsu sorcery, just like how Sukuna is the king of curses. So their battle seems sort of fated. We've already had predictions about who would win or lose. Gojo thinks he would win, Based on the feats we have seen from Gojo, I'm inclined to believe him. Of course, there's no real indication that we've seen everything Sukuna is capable of. He is also called the King of Poisons, and Gojo says that he would have more trouble with poisons when it comes to using the Infinity to protect himself. So, that would possibly be some way that Sukuna could get ahead over Gojo. But we don't know. We'll probably have to wait until the end of the series. I mean, I think the fight is totally going to happen, especially if Sukuna does find a way to get out of Yuji's body. A showdown between Gojo and Sukuna is, it's prophesized. It's going to happen. So we'll just have to wait and see. But with that, that's really all I have to say. Unfortunately, Sukuna does not have as much sort of character substance as a lot of the other people I've talked about, which is why I've talked about them first. But Sukuna is still a very entertaining character. I mean, every time Sukuna shows up in the story, it's just pure hype, because you know, ah, shit, everything's about to get wrecked. Because it's Sukuna, the King of Curses, and the dude's just a complete maniac that will destroy everything in his path. So, whenever the tattoos show up on Yuji's face, we're like, ah, fuck. Oh god, everything's gonna go to shit again. And, well, those are usually parts of the story that really stand out. So, while Sukuna coming out is a bad thing for our characters, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a very exciting occurrence for us. So, hopefully, we're going to be seeing a lot more from Sukuna in the future. I say that almost as if it's not guaranteed, when, I mean, like, we're going to see more of Sukuna in the future. If we do get more developments on Sukuna's character in the future, like what his plan is with Ryomen, why he became a cursed spirit, things like that, I'll probably do this video again, to be honest. Once we have a lot more meat to his actual character, I'll almost definitely do another video talking about him. So, I guess look forward to that in the circumstance in which it does happen. But with that, that's really all I have to say for this video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you don't miss any of my uploads. I do Jujutsu Kaisen chapter reviews every week, and I have been doing Jujutsu Kaisen character discussions every other week, but I'm going to change that up now, because the last character that I really want to do a discussion video on is Todo, but, you know, he's got some stuff going on in Shibuya right now, so if that's not concluded within the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be waiting to do the video, and if Todo is still relevant to the story, I'm going to wait even longer to do the video on him, so we're not going to have as much consistency in when these are uploaded. I'll try to keep doing them on Tuesdays like I have thus far, but in the meantime, I will be finding other content to do, likely from some of the other series that I cover, which include Record of Ragnarok, Chainsaw Man, and Kagen Omega, so if you're interested in those, you should definitely check out my channel and subscribe if you find that you enjoy them. If you enjoy discussing Jujutsu Kaisen with other people, or you just enjoy the content I produce on this channel, I highly suggest you check out my Discord server. I have a link to it on my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.